simply walk the talk.
Recording in 3, 2, 1. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another fascinating show. This is your host, Josh Holland, and I am excited to talk about all things light. And we have a wonderful guest. This is a podcast interview in which we've tried to schedule for quite some time, and I'm happy to say we finally got it started. Today we have on the show Matt Maruca, and I've actually known of Matt Maruca for quite some time, but and we'll talk about this as we get into his background and things like that. But he's the founder and CEO of Raw Optics. He's also author of The Light Diet, which portrays ways to optimize our health by optimizing our exposure to light. So this is definitely one of those episodes you want to listen to. I'm going to provide some really cool information in the show notes on this one. The show is going to basically walk through the 8 steps which he highlights in his book. And so we're going to kind of go down the list, talk about each one of these, talk about his experience. And I mean, this guy is doing some really cool stuff. In fact, the glasses that I always wear for various podcast interviews, or even if I'm just kind of out and about, when you see those yellow tinted glasses I wear or the red tinted glasses that I wear, those are Raw Optics. And so we finally got the person who created it on the show. He's rocking his right now too, which normally he probably wouldn't be doing that, but I think he's doing it for the show, which is cool. But anyway, Mr. Matt Maruca.
Only because I'm in the sun. That's the key. You wear them when you're not in the sun, when you're inside bad lighting. But I am exposed to good sun right now. That's why. That's
right. And we'll talk about that. So Mr. Matt, welcome to the show, bro.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. And I appreciate your kind words about the authorship. You know, I still feels like a jump for me. I feel like I actually have to turn it into a physical book in the traditional sense before I call myself an author. But I do appreciate that because, you know, the Light Diet, even though it's an online video course, it could be considered like a short ebook. It really has the majority of the information someone would need to really come to understand these concepts. And I'm very grateful for your kind praise of it, because I want it kind of, you know, you're helping me to shift my own perspective about my own creation and how I promote that and share that with the world. So
my pleasure. Yeah. My pleasure. You know, I can relate because, like we were talking about before we started recording, I'm in the process of finishing a book. And I know how difficult it is to go down the path of putting something so near and dear to you out there. But I've gone through the whole course and I've read the entire book in the PDF and watched all the videos, and it's very, very good. So once we get to the end of this, everyone, we'll give you a link to be able to access this. But I definitely think it's a really good start for understanding just how important light is. And, you know, I'm so excited to talk about whether to wear sunglasses or not, whether to expose yourself to the sun or wear sunscreen or not. We're going to be talking about different rancid oils and how that may affect skin problems and things like that. So this is one of those episodes you definitely want to listen to. But I think before we dive into the book and before we dive into the course, let's talk about your background. Why did you get to the point where you are now, where you're the go-to person for all things light?
Well, thanks for that as well. I'd love to think of myself as the go-to person, and that's a kind of an honor. So I was just having some health challenges as a kid, just not feeling well. You know, I was having headaches, gut issues, allergies, and the like, as young as I can really remember. And then going into high school, I was really just feeling worse and worse and worse. And I had already tried Western medicine. I had already tried naturopathic medicine. I had already taken a bunch of drugs, and it just didn't really make a big impact for me. And so I started reading online, and I came to have this idea that I had a damaged gut. You know, basically, I was reading it. I was like, well, all these things that they say happen with the damaged gut are happening with me. And so maybe that's why. And so then I started reading about these diets like the paleo diet, et cetera, where you could actually heal your gut. You know, this was a really interesting concept. And I was also reading about this concept of epigenetics that really fascinated me, that we could actually modify our biology through environmental inputs by that affect how our genes are expressed. And this was fascinating, super fascinating. And it was sort of like my soul telling me at the time, like, this is going to be a really big deal down the road. I didn't realize like how big of a deal it would maybe be for me and the work I'm doing. But that epigenetics term really hit me. And I just kind of kept going down the rabbit hole. And I got into light because when I was first learning about food, I had a huge result in my health just by changing my diet to more natural foods. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is unbelievable. Like, what else is there? What else is out there? And when I kept trying to kind of optimize further and clear off I'd say probably like 50% plus of my symptoms went away just by eating a cleaner diet. It was pretty amazing. But I thought like, okay, the other 50%, like, or 25%, whatever was really left over, I should be able to heal this too, based on what I'm learning. It's not like this is a partial solution. Like, this is this is supposed to be a full solution, whether it's this or something else. And I just, no matter how much I tweaked my diet, I couldn't really get that other 50% like fully dialed in. But I had such a huge improvement already that I was like stoked. It was even maybe more like 75%. I was like just trying to really dial in the rest of everything. And so then I came across, after like a year of just going through super strict, extreme healing diets and the like, I went really extreme, I would say, on all these different types of diets. And I kind of like made myself almost sicker because mentally I got so stressed, and it was not, I wasn't taking good care of myself, I'll put it that way. So I ended up coming across some different researchers and bloggers who are basically saying like, if you're eating a perfect diet, but you're having a really hard time with your health, these are some things you may want to consider. It may be that your mitochondria, your cellular engines, are actually having issues.
Mm-hmm.
And so, no matter how good the food is, if your mitochondria don't work well, then you can't process it optimally. And this fascinated me. And so one of the main ways that we can improve the health of our mitochondria, these cellular engines, was actually using light. And so that's where light became this like, whoa, this is a really significant factor. And it's gone down a bunch of different paths since that time, like into the spiritual, emotional, mental, that I didn't really even anticipate. But light just became a really significant factor for me. And it is sort of like it's my whole calling at this point. And the light diet is the light diet even started as like something to get us more into sunlight and more into the sun, and blocking artificial light, and so on. Like the glasses I started, the company Raw makes the products to help people do this. And so the glasses are one of those. We're working on light panels, we're working on lighting, things like that. But ultimately, the light diet itself is a way that people can embody this idea that we are beings of light, that we're energy beings. And especially that based on what I'm learning, we're actually unlimited in our nature, like based on quantum physics and the sort of more advanced understanding of how energy and matter interact in this three-dimensional world. There is a potential in the quantum field, we can say, that every human can be fully illumined to our sort of divine nature, if you will, to a sort of greater awareness of the universe. And I'm not considering myself an enlightened being per se, like the ancient masters. There are many masters out there, but all that's to say that all of the things I learned in the science light-based world opened the gates to a scientific understanding of the spiritual disciplines of the last thousands of years, and that some of the things that Jesus said and did weren't just metaphors or exaggerations or miracles, that those are things that are possible, and that the Eastern masters in India who have, also created miraculous, beautiful healings, these aren't just random things, or they're not just myths. These are, and people have seen these things. And then you look at like Dr. Joe Dispenza, who's someone I've been learning from a lot recently and going to his live events. You have people at these events practicing these meditation, science-based meditation practices, literally recovering their vision. People who have been blind for a decade, people who have been deaf for years, recovering their hearing, people who have been paralyzed in a wheelchair for years, recovering their ability to walk because they get over energetic blockages in their energy field, which is who we really are. And so, and what we really are is the energy field, and the matter is just the hologram or the sort of illusion that we have of perception of what we are. So anyhow, that's sort of the high level, like, how did I get into this and why am I doing what I'm doing, and why does it feel important to me as a 22-year-old who could just be running around and, I don't know, drinking and partying.
Yeah, dude. It's thank you for the detailed background. I think it's very important up to this point so that we can really allow the person to understand why they should continue listening. Because, like you mentioned, you're young, and I knew about you for a couple of years. In fact, I'm good friends with Ingrid out of LA,
Oh,
and
cool.
Dr. Shaker Pie and Dr. Scott Scher and a lot of these guys. And that was my crew when I was based in LA, like for most of 2020. And so I kind of heard the names going around the circles, and when you get to talking about various blue blocking lenses, you can't help but notice raw optics. You guys are up there with some of the best names. So this is kind of when I started to hear about you. And then when I actually got your glasses, I thought, okay, you know what? Let me like actually try to see if I can reach out to these guys to talk to them about what they're doing. And I heard that you were coming out with this PDF course and also various light panels and things like that. So I thought, why not? This would be very exciting. So let's talk about the 8 steps. I have them listed here. You have first step is sleep with the sun. Then next step is rise with the sun. Then it's live outdoors during the day and sunbathe amply. Then you have drink clean spring water. Next is eat a seasonal seafood based diet. Next is utilize cold and heat therapy, aka temperature therapy. Then you have avoid non-native electromagnetic pollution. And then you finish with cultivate your inner light. And what I'll say before we kind of start diving into this, these are the steps you have listed in the PDF portion, but then you have various links that coincide with each of those steps, which I think is really cool. And the average time is, I would say, about 8 minutes or so. But what I thought was really cool is that with the part 1 and part 2 on the electromagnetic field pollution combined, it's about an hour, which I thought was really interesting because, it just goes to show just how important that is. But then you finish with cultivate your inner light, which is probably the most important one, right? So it's really cool. But let's start with sleeping with the sun. And what the hell does that even mean?
Yeah, let's do it. So basically, so sleeping with the sun is just the way that we can naturally allow our body to heal. So basically, life evolved in, I'm probably going to digress in a variety of directions. It's so
All
funny
good.
because this course is something I actually filmed the videos for this, I think last November. And it's fascinating for me to observe like how much my thinking develops even in under a year, like even in, I mean, it's almost a year now, but it's like I'm really excited because so I would say to anyone, first of all, who's going through this, everything in there effectively is very valuable information. And it's gotten me so many improvements in my health. I'm just excited because I realize like, wow, it's going to be high time for a light diet, 3.0 in like another, maybe, I don't know, 6 months. Now, whether that's actually going to be something I make priority, probably not right now, because this has basically everything people need to know to get started, but it's just a point worth mentioning. So if there are any tweaks or modifications, I won't be hesitant to share those because I'm constantly learning and evolving. But again, this is a really good foundation because it's like so far beyond what most people are even considering. And even if someone just did 10% of what's in there, they would get a benefit. But so basically, stepping back, rather than just getting into the detail on that step and going through the detail of everything, every single step, what I would say is it's important to understand that like life is this dynamic flow of energy and matter interacting. And we evolved in a certain environment that really the environment drove the evolution. Like, so we evolved in context of what was available in our environment, what sort of things needed to be done, what sort of reactions are available to be catalyzed. And that's sort of how life exists. Like if you take away the environment, there's no life. You know, if you take away food and sunlight and water, then there's no life. So we are like intimately tied into our environment. And one of the significant shifts in the environment, at least where we are on Earth, is that we have this daily rotation around our own axis that causes, now if you're on the Earth's surface and you didn't know anything about astronomy, it would just be like it's day and super bright, and then it's night and super dark. And so life, you know, organisms that can adapt to changes in their environment have higher abilities to survive, basically speaking. And at a really simple level, at even like a level of a bacteria or some kind of basic organism, you would have to be able to predict like, okay, there's this gigantic blazing ball of fire that's putting down, you know, for some organisms, highly toxic light, you know, like bacteria and simple organisms can't handle sunlight. So that's why, you know, these kinds of things like mold and a lot of things grow better in dark, damp areas, not in the sun. The sun is bactericidal, meaning it kills bacteria almost of all kinds. But these were the original life forms before complex life evolved. But so, you know, they had to be able to adjust with even just sunlight's presence or absence. And then life that evolved that was able to not just protect itself from sunlight, but actually utilize sunlight, had to also be able to evolve to, you know, okay, this light's around and it's available, and then it's not around and it's not available. So something's got to change. Like, for example, maybe one way to think about it is like if you had a refrigerator that had like a power supply, but it only had a power supply like half the day, it would have to figure out like, okay, well, I only have this power like half the day. So I'm going to have to figure out how to keep all these things cold the other half of the day, you know, because if it was just like banking on that always being there, it wouldn't really work. Like if, for example, if we had evolved so that like if the sun is present, we're alive, and if it's not, we're dead, then we would die, you know, we would be dead every day. So there has to be some kind of balance. And that's why we have these adaptations. Like imagine truly it's possible there could be a living organism that requires the presence of the sun. And if it's gone, we die. Right. So now that's not the case, but that could be something that's a potential in the universe. So we evolved so that when the sun's not around, we're still good. We have, you know, we capture some energy, we utilize some energy, but we function sort of in certain respects independently of the sun. That's, again, just one example to kind of illustrate the point. So we have these things. I like to kind of give this detail so people can kind of conceptualize what I'm getting at. We have this thing called a circadian rhythm in our body, which is this biological clock, is another way of calling it. And the circadian rhythm or circadian rhythms really, because there are sort of different rhythms in different organs and cells and so on. But circadian circa means approximately, and dies means 1 day in Latin. So the rhythms, when they first discovered them, they saw they're approximately 1 day. And so these rhythms basically are biological timekeepers of the external environment. So they track with the sun. That's why they're approximately the length of the day. Again, they're inside of us. They're not in the sun or outside of us, but they're obviously mirroring the external environment so we can predict and adapt to that change of day and night, the day, one full day. And so basically the basic things that the circadian rhythm is let's say coding for or driving is the wakefulness in complex organisms like humans that exist during the day, and then sleep and repair at night. And all the facets of wakefulness, for example, appetite, hunger, drive to get food, dopamine production, drive to do things, that's what dopamine does. It gives you motivation to do things and be productive. Serotonin to wake you up and make you feel good being awake. all these things are part of our circadian rhythm, muscle repair, hormone secretions, neurotransmitter secretions, everything in life that occurs is part of the circadian rhythm effectively. Because if you look at it top down, the circadian rhythm controls the highest level functions of the body, sleep and wakefulness and consciousness. And therefore, everything else is affected in some way or another, trickling down from like a spring, feeding into a massive river way down the continent. It starts and it affects everything. And so this timing system is super important for a lot of things in the body. And, basically, if we throw it off, we start to have a lot of issues. And those issues are just simply the result of our system evolved and is sort of, we could say, designed, so to speak, even if maybe whether or not we want to say there's some kind of intelligent creator or creative force in the universe or not, or if it's just the quote unquote, the laws of physics, for the atheists out there, whatever that is, that's led to the universe functioning the way it functions. It is some kind of intelligence because there's some level of organization. It doesn't have to be like conscious intelligence in the way that some people have a stigma against God and things like this, the concept of God, which I think God is just at least my current understanding, probably going to evolve, but God is the term that people have used to describe the intelligence of the universe for all of time. And the more closely we can align ourselves with this intelligence, the more we can experience love and joy and bliss, because we're not fighting against the creative force or the guiding force of everything. But so sleep with the sun, this kind of answers several of the steps in a sense, but let's go deeper. I like this. This is a cool form. I've never actually had the guests turn the script on me and take me through the steps to explain them. I really appreciate it. I'm always the one, going through each one. This is what you do. This is what you do. So this is really fascinating, actually. But so basically, sleeping with the sun really just means when the sun goes down, right? When the sun is bye-bye, as a living organism that has evolved, this is, I'll go a little deeper. So we're not only evolved with the sun to power the timing of the biology and all these secretions and everything, the sun also powers it. So it's both the clock and the energy source. Another way of putting it is it's the timekeeper and the power source. Exactly. It's the switch and the current flowing on the wire. That's a perfect way to put it. Yeah. So it triggers everything. So basically, another way to think of this is, again, life began actually not in the sun. It began based on the research in the bottom of the ocean, powered by geothermal vents. And that's a really fascinating discussion we could get into maybe another time. But basically, because it is a very long and complex discussion that I'm a big fan of, but basically life was more chemical based in the beginning. It was still utilizing light energy because that was the energy source coming out of these vents, was hot infrared energy, which is effectively light energy from the Earth's molten core, bringing out really hot fluids that are basically had a lot of energy to catalyze reactions in these vents between carbon and hydrogen, making things like methane, like these sort of primitive organic molecules that began to structure themselves. And basically life, that beginning of life was like a spark that starts a wildfire that travels forever. It was just a spark at the bottom of the ocean that set in motion a reaction, we can say, that basically has gone on to catalyze a lot of molecules. So another way to put this that I find really fascinating is that life, basically, like in the universe, there's this concept that, from a physics perspective, putting aside even spirituality, although I can link them, I think in a really interesting, fun way, but basically life, or just in general, the universe wants to be satisfied, we can say, right? So like there's the second law of thermodynamics, if I'm not messing up my laws of thermodynamics here, is because I'm not a formally trained physicist, to be honest, but it's that basically all things ultimately tend towards entropy or towards disorder in the universe. So like, for example, the best example I could think of is if someone like farts in a room, the gas molecules naturally want to spread out and sort of equalize, and sort of the direction of the universe in general is that everything is trending towards what they call entropy, or they call it disorder. But another perspective would be that it's perfect harmony, actually, when it's not really disorder, because if everything's totally in balance, like fully at maximum entropy, everything's in perfect harmony and balance. And so anyway, the interesting thing about, I'll keep going with this if you don't mind. So the interesting thing, we'll loop it back together to the sleep with the sun and how it links to like life and being powered by the light. But so as far as this origin of life conversation, because now you've got me going, and I do like it a lot. Basically, the universe is trending towards entropy, and yet on Earth, it's interesting because life looks like it defies entropy, because we have the structure and we look like we're something that's against entropy. So life sort of seems to defy entropy, the second law of thermodynamics, but in reality, it's not, because we're only temporary. So given the energy available from the sun, it's sort of, when there's a certain level of energy present, it allows things to sort of temporarily defy, quote unquote, this situation. But so another way of putting it, looking back at the origin of life, is that these primitive organisms, what they're basically doing, in the same way that a wildfire, it's taking an energy opportunity in the environment. So the energy opportunity in the case of a wildfire is that there's a lot of dry brush, which is hydrogen-based fuel, because brush carbohydrates are based on hydrogen, which was initially made, interestingly enough, from water that was split during the process of photosynthesis. So you have the way a plant makes itself is using water from the ground or from the rain or from the ocean, and carbon dioxide that's present in the Earth's atmosphere, and sunlight energy, which is the energy source, causes that hydrogen H2O, the water, to split. And then the hydrogens and the oxygen are now sort of in suspended animation from one another. They like being together. They're very happy together. That's sort of like entropy in a sense. They like to be together, but they're sort of split by that energy from the sun. They're both held in a sort of suspended state of energy and separate from one another. And the plant takes that hydrogen and actually puts it onto a carbon backbone, and the carbon comes from the carbon dioxide in the air, and it stores that energy in the hydrogen bonds, basically in the form of the electrons of the hydrogen being excited. And it stores that energy on a carbon backbone, and that makes carbohydrates, that makes sugar, all the food we eat that is plants, all the cellulose that makes up the leaves and the things we can't necessarily digest as humans. All of that is carbohydrate. Like even a tree is just cellulose. It's tightly wound sugars that becomes very hard. And so basically, when there's a fire, there's an opportunity for all this brush that all it takes is one single spark, and it starts to free off certain hydrogens, a little spark energy input. It causes some of those hydrogens to jump off that carbon backbone. And then when they jump off, they want to merge back to that oxygen that they were initially split from. And all that oxygen's hanging out in the air. It's everywhere. And so they rejoin that oxygen, and that releases a ton of energy. Yeah. And then that energy release causes more hydrogens to be freed. And then they go merge with more oxygens. It makes a lot of water, which you don't see because in a fire they evaporate. But that reaction perpetuates itself, because every time a hydrogen hops off, merges with water, it goes. And that's why wildfires happen, because they go forever. They'll go until they run out of fuel. Either you suffocate them or you get rid of the fuel source, because you're not going to suffocate a wildfire from oxygen, because there's lots of it in the atmosphere. Right. So basically, life at the bottom of the ocean that started was like a wildfire that began. Basically, there was a reaction that was sort of sparked by this energy present in these vents. And it was basically the reaction of different molecules like carbon and hydrogen that would merge together. And then that was, given the energy circumstances present there, even though carbon and hydrogen were perfectly happy wherever they were before, it was more favorable in that energy context for them to come together. And so ultimately, what life has gone on to do is found ways that it can take different molecules like that that basically would like to react together, but can't because of the energy circumstances of the environment being different. So another way of sort of putting that is there's a really good book that I recommend people read who want to understand this origin of life called The Vital Question by a researcher from London named Nick Lane, Dr. Nick Lane. And one of the things that if you look at all life that it has in common is that all life has basically, it uses different what are called redox couples. So different basically molecules in the environment that want to react but can't. But if you put energy in, basically you put in enough energy, just like in the case of sunlight allowing for photosynthesis to happen, splitting that water and allowing the plants to store that energy in its sugar. You put in a little bit of energy, you can bring the energy. You basically, actually there's two ways it happens, that we can use enzymes to lower the activation energy required to make these reactions happen. But actually you put in some energy, and that energy that goes in, like, let's just say there's two, a good way to use it, to say this is an analogy. Say there's two people who are like kind of they're sort of in a relationship, each of them in separate relationships, and they would make a great couple, like a really great couple. But they're sort of in these other relationships that aren't so good, but like they don't have quite the stimulus to get out of those relationships. Like something has to happen. There has to be like some input of energy that causes them to be like, oh my gosh, this is the person for me, right? And so they break free from their previous configurations, and then they join each other, and they're much happier in that state, right? So that's actually what life is doing all throughout Earth. And that's what is happening constantly throughout the universe. So it's like, it's so fascinating because when I put it like this, from a very basic science perspective, life's job is to satisfy the universe. Now, how do Christians speak about what our job is or Christians or any religion? Our job is to glorify God, satisfy the universe, glorify God. What's the difference? There's no difference. Actually, there's no difference. Like, seriously, that's the funny part about this. So like our job is, whether there's this intelligent guy in the sky with a beard or not, our job is to satisfy the universe, right? As living organisms. That's it. This is very scientific. And that's what happened starting at these vents at the bottom of the ocean 4 billion years ago, as they estimate, right? So anyway, so stepping through this process, I really think this is fascinating because there's stuff I'm going to skip just because I want to get into the steps also. But basically the core of why this is so important is when life is taking, back to this relationship analogy, these couples that are separate, but that would actually be better together. We're basically speeding up the process of returning everything to entropy. So we're sort of, I think of life like little, I don't even know the best way to put it, but imagine like a little sort of bug that crawls through like a field of decomposing leaves and kind of chomps them up and then makes them like they're sort of decomposed, right? Mm-hmm. We're sort of doing that with every available energy opportunity on Earth. And different bacteria, which is the majority of all life, is bacteria and archaea on Earth, even though we don't see it because it's too small. Bacteria and archaea use, like all life, two different, we'll call them redox couples. That's the scientific term, but it's just like couples, like we were saying. And so what it does is it inputs enough energy to break these things free from their previous bonds and allow them to go back to where they're more happy and satisfied, right? And so bacteria and archaea can do this with a wide variety of molecules. It's amazing. They can do it with so many things. Now, one particular bacteria evolved that is now our mitochondria. This is the full story I'm giving. I'm really happy we're doing this actually, because I haven't done this level of depth on a podcast in a long time.
This is gold, man.
So basically what life does is, so mitochondria, so one bacteria in particular that evolved throughout all the bacteria that evolved found a really, really useful redox couple. Very, very useful. Hydrogen and oxygen. And so basically this is a mitochondria, but it wasn't a mitochondria. It was just a bacteria. And so this particular bacteria that evolved happened to be really, really good at catalyzing reactions in the way that I'm talking about. It was just really good. It produced a lot of energy because it was using a really good substrate, oxygen. There's lots of it, and it was really good for the purposes of what it was doing. And then there was another archaeobacteria that was present that was really good at basically managing structure and function. And so this sort of merger happened where, and this is the only time that it's known in biology that this ever happened, but two separate bacteria, which was for 2 billion years, 2.5 billion years of out of 4 of evolution to date, everything was just bacteria and archaea, so small that we can't even see them, but as what we are. But basically, unless you were looking through a microscope, of course. And so they kind of made a deal. Like it would be as if you had someone who's really good at like high level thinking and administration and that kind of stuff and operations, and then someone who's just really good at sales in a business. They were just crushing it. So the one that's the energy producer is really good at sales, and the one that's the sort of in the life in biological terms, it's responsible for structure and function. This is like the operations manager type of person, like the CEO and the sales guy, basically, right? Mm-hmm. And so they made a deal, and we're like, well, and the thing is, the interesting thing is that one CEO, one of these types of people, this bacteria, could basically manage or oversee the responsibilities of up to 1,000 of these salespeople, interestingly enough. So you have all these salespeople, all these mitochondria or all these bacteria. What they're basically doing is not only do they have to go out and generate energy, aka make sales, in our example here, they have to go out and generate energy, but they also have to find the clients, and they have to, they have to do all these other things. They have to run payroll, finances, admin. They have to do all these different things. And it's just a whole pain for them because they're just really good at making sales. That's it. They just close deals, right? In the biological side of the example, it's really just generating energy, right? So basically what the host cell, aka the CEO, said was like, well, listen, guys, I'm really good. I have a constant stream of clients for you to close, aka in this example, food supply and nutrients for them to process. I can bring that. I can manage all the admin, payroll, et cetera, housing. I'll give you all that, right? And you just go out and sell. And so that's basically what this merger was biologically. So the reason life, this is the question that I'm answering here, is how did life go from single-celled organisms to trillion-cell organisms? Like that's a huge jump in energy. Like what made that possible? Well, what made that possible is that so each the energy expenditure by these bacteria, each maintaining their entire life, can be expressed in the number of genes that they have to maintain and express, because each gene needs to be maintained and then expressed, making proteins to carry out functions, right? So basically you have 1,000 genes per bacteria, right? And they're spending all their energy maintaining and expressing 1,000 genes, right? And so that's a lot, right? So what happened is this host cell took in these bacteria and reduced their genes from 1,000 to just basically like 26 genes, and for about 13 key proteins. So it's a really significant reduction in the number of genes that are utilized to express these proteins. It's a very small number. It's somewhere in that ballpark of like 13 key proteins that are coded for by the mitochondria now, where it used to be a lot more, right? And so you do that with one, that's a pretty big energy savings, because all that energy that's saved that mitochondria is still producing now can be given over to the host cell, right? But if you do that with 1,000 mitochondria, which every single human cell has about 1,000 mitochondria, bacterial cells inside of it producing energy, that's a lot. Like 1,000 or like 900 times 1,000, that's like a pretty significant energy boost for a cell. Like we're talking like for just one single cell, we're talking, 1,000 times 1,000 is like 100 million, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. 10 or 100 million.
100 million, yeah.
Yeah. So basically,
we're not math experts here.
Yeah, whatever it is. Yeah, exactly. Right. No, it's made 10 million, I think, probably 1,000 times 1,000. But basically, no, 10 times 1,000 is 10,000. 100 times 1,000 is 100,000.
I'm gonna go to the calculator.
You get the idea. Yeah, this is I'm clearly not a mental math.
1,000 times 1,000.
I'm putting my money on 10 million. This is funny.
I'm putting it on 1 million. Wait, what?
Oh, no. It is a million, 1,000. Yeah, what am I thinking
thousand,
about?
a million.
A thousand thousands, a million. But so anyway, that's like a million or 900,000 fold energy savings per single cell, right? So it's like, what do you do with that much more energy? Like, that's ridiculous. And the way it works, also, just to add a little more detail, the way it was able to work at this level is because basically, in order to generate energy, it requires a membrane. So all energy is generated across membranes in all living organisms. And so basically, the mitochondria, what happened is, a single cell could only get so big because basically the membrane ratio to interior space of all the things that had to be maintained could only get so big, and life was sort of constrained at the size of bacteria, which are tiny with the amount of membranes versus interior stuff. But if you could fit inside of that cell a ton more membranes and pack them in really tightly, you could actually increase its you could trick the system and get a lot bigger, because basically, again, the constraint is surface area to volume. And so if you could put a ton of surface area inside of that, you could go significantly bigger in volume. So that's why a single human cell, or single eukaryotic cell, meaning it has a nucleus, it's not a bacteria, basically, it is significantly bigger than any bacterial cell. It has so much so that it has the equivalent of 1,000 bacteria inside of it. And that's possible due to this basic sort of surface area trick. And the mitochondria, they're a bunch of folded membranes. That's why they're so good at generating energy, because they have so much surface area, among other things. So anyway, it's this merging of this sort of basically delegation of the CEO and this really killer sales team that comes together, and it frees up. The key thing is that all those salespeople are freed up. They no longer have to deal with the 1,000 other processes that are required in running a business, or AKA running a living organism. And all that extra energy from every single one is freed up to all be taken care of by the host. And so the host can now become a lot more complex. In fact, what happened with the genes from the mitochondria is they were all transferred. Another way to put this is, imagine again, 1,000 mitochondria with 1,000 genes each. The vast majority of those genes are transferred to the nucleus of the cell, of the host cell, where they only need not 1,000 copies of those 1,000 genes. You only need 2 copies of those 1,000 genes. And the 2 is for sexual reproduction. Otherwise, you would only need 1 copy, but 2 copies so that they can be switched every generation and mixed in with the rest without all looking identical. And so now that you only have 2 copies, because like I said from the beginning, to maintain and express a genome requires energy. And so if you can have 2 copies instead of 1,000 copies of those 1,000 genes, that's a huge energy savings. And that's really how it works and how it's manifest in this theoretical cell we're talking about. And so that nuclear genome now, with all that freed up energy, can basically focus on, like the CEO could, on, now that he has all this extra energy or resources or capital, we could think of in a sense, to think about all the expansion projects like arms and legs and all the things that make an organism far more complex, different organ systems and tissues. And that's literally how life went from single bacteria to massively complex organisms like us. Now, the complex organisms in the universe are that were in Earth really are, because I don't know about the rest of the universe besides Earth, that's all we're talking about here, but plants, animals, and fungi, right? And then all the rest are bacteria and archaea. But plants, animals, and fungi constitute the majority of life that we think about on a daily basis. Animals, plants, mushrooms, things like that. In fact, we really probably don't, most people don't think about fungi, except the people who are watching, Paul Stamets videos about fantastic fungi and all this other cool stuff about mycelium networks and the whole thing, which is fascinating too. Anyway, so this is like a super in-depth rundown of like life and mitochondria and why it's so important. We've already been on the phone for almost an hour, which is mind-boggling. But I'll get to sort of a summary of this long story so that we can get deeper into the why this is all so important, because there could be a disconnect in someone's mind of like, okay, this is all cool, but why is it important? Well, so basically, what this means is that, I was telling all of this to just kind of illustrate the origin of life. As life evolved out of these vents and came to the surface, whereas we were relying initially on energy from reactions that were sort of being catalyzed by this infrared energy from the vents and the molecules available at the base of at the base of the Earth's, the ocean's surface and so on, life eventually came to the surface where sunlight's present. And that's another. So as life's sort of goal, as we've, discussed here, is to take energy opportunities and to make them happen that wouldn't have otherwise happened, basically catalyzing the universe, satisfying the universe, glorifying God, if you will, as some have called it for thousands of years. Sunlight gives us another opportunity to do a better job at this process, because it's just another source of energy that we can utilize to do stuff. And basically it's kind of funny, because as long as the sun is burning, the sun is going to kind of keep causing photosynthesis to occur, probably, barring some significant change on the Earth's topography and climate and everything. The sun's going to keep causing photosynthesis to occur. And then some kind of organism is going to evolve. Even if all humans or all animals went extinct, something is going to evolve to figure out how to take what was created through photosynthesis and re-release that energy. So just to cover one more point, this is really fun for me, at least. The reaction couple that our mitochondria use is the same as a fire. So the mitochondria use oxygen and hydrogen.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, just like a fire requires oxygen from the air, if you put a cup over a candle, the candle burns out very quickly. It can't burn because it'll use all the oxygen very quickly. So we use oxygen as well. And in the same way that a candle or any fire uses a hydrogen-based fuel source, whether it's wax in the candle or logs in a fire or gasoline, these are all hydrogen-based fuel sources. We use the same. We eat food, and that's our hydrogen-based fuel source, whether it's fats or carbohydrates. And so we're doing a controlled, slow burn of the food that we eat in our mitochondria, in our cellular engines, inside of our body at all times. And that's all these pieces coming together. I really hope that whoever's heard all of this can start to put the pieces together in their mind. These 1,000 of these cellular engines per human cell, of which we have 50 to 100 trillion human cells. So you multiply that by 1,000, then you have like a bajillion, gajillion, basically, mitochondria in the human organism. That was a bit of an exaggeration. That was a made up number for those who weren't sure. That's not a real number, but it's a really big number. We could do 1,000 times 50 trillion, and that would be an approximate number. It's somewhere in the quintillions or something like that, or dectillions or sextillions. But anyway, it's a lot. And when we're eating food, it's literally all going into those mitochondria in every single cell. Now it's being broken down first, and it's being processed as fuel in these mini universes inside of our body. And all of it, let's just be clear, all of that is being controlled by a cycle that's controlled by the sun in our environment every day. Boom. So I know that was a really, really long tangent.
Mic drop.
But yeah, Mike, that's what I was going to say. Let me just do it. If we mess up the timing of that process and the way that process is powered, it's not going to work. And when it doesn't work, we are going to feel like crap, and we are going to get really sick and unwell. And when it works really well, when we get in harmony with it, we can literally become perfect. Like, not actually, yeah, perfect. I mean, the most perfect beings ever to live are these illumined masters. And these are people who are like so tuned in that they basically almost need to eat nothing. They live off the cosmic vibration of the universe and the sunlight, and they don't need to eat really any food. And they're perfectly tuned in. They're also, even though the human brain is this powerful thing that can have all the kinds of crazy thoughts, they've mastered their mind. They've gained full control of the thoughts of their mind, which is very hard. And very few people do it. That's why, Jesus said, narrow is the gate and straight is the way which leadeth unto life, and few there be that find it. But so this is getting a little bit spiritual on that side, but that's like the super in-depth explanation of what is life in a sense. How did it evolve? How did life become complex? What are mitochondria? Why are they important for our health? Because they produce our energy. Fun fact, if you take cyanide, like the poison from, that people would have on a capsule in war, and they'd bite it if they got captured so they would die, cyanide cuts off energy flow in the mitochondria, so you die immediately. That's why it works. And then it's actually the opposite of red light therapy. So cytochrome C oxidase is blocked by cyanide. It's a perfect example. Red light therapy enhances the function of cytochrome C oxidase, or just going in the sun. So basically, you can think of it that way. And then there's a really cool research from the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, University of Pennsylvania, which is in Philly, where I'm from originally, and basically showing that if your mitochondria aren't completely toast, like in the case of cyanide killing you, but their function is declined by a certain percentage, basically what happens is the cells can't work at, they, like, we need a certain minimum amount of energy for organ systems and cells to work, right, in a certain levels. And if you go below a certain threshold, what happens is you start to see diseases manifest. So we can actually tolerate reductions in energy production, and depending on the system and the cells, to a certain amount. But once it goes below a certain threshold, then you start to see all these diseases appearing. Diabetes, if it's in the pancreas; obesity, if it's in the brain, in the centers that are responsible for regulating metabolism and feeding activity. Ironically, obesity isn't a diet of something in the body, or a disease of something on the body. It's a disease in the brain of timing and accounting for food and hunger and so on.
Yep.
If it happens in the brain, especially, you can also have Alzheimer's disease, neurodegenerative diseases. If it's happening in the heart, you can have heart disease. If you're having this mitochondrial dysfunction in your in your sex organs, you'll be infertile. It's all encompassing, basically. And this is a super scientific, way of explaining a lot of the really ancient wisdom that they just knew about how to dial in your meal timing and your intake of food and certain types of food and certain seasons and certain other practices. So with all that being said, sleeping with the sun is important because it's the time when we heal and we repair our mitochondria, because they get worn down through daily activity. So there's this really great molecule called melatonin, which is the master repair molecule for all the mitochondria in the entire body. And it's produced not only in the pineal gland, which is sort of the master production center for the brain and so on, and the bloodstream, but it's actually produced within each cell. Melatonin is, and it heals the mitochondria from the activity of the day. And what happens is, in being in the sun, among many other things that we've talked about that the circadian rhythm is responsible for, it stimulates the production of this melatonin. It sets the stage for melatonin to be produced and created. And then in the evening, darkness, this is the key, that darkness is that time that we've allotted for healing of the cells, release and secretion of the melatonin, healing all the cells, so that we can wake up the next day feeling supercharged, super alive, full of life, ready to conquer, ready to go out and do whatever we're doing. So if we stay up, this is where I was kind of leaving off. If light doesn't just set the timing, it also powers the reactions. Yep. So this is where I got super deep, and I appreciate you sticking with me through this whole thing, because this is sort of like, I'd say, magical going on here. But basically, so where we left off is light isn't just the switch, it's also the power, it's the current. And so light is for life. In other words, the sun sets the timing of everything, but it's also powering things. In other words, another way of putting this that people could really think of it is the light that hits the eye in the morning. It tells the brain, okay, it's time to wake up. It's time to start doing X, Y, and Z and making these secretions of these hormones. But cortisol. In fact, cortisol, exactly. But in fact, as the day goes on, that light that not only is the trigger and the switch, we actually require that light, not just on our eye, but on our skin and in our cells, to power certain reactions. So for example, simple example, in the case of what people talk about, red light therapy, that's super popular. Red light therapy is useful and beneficial to the body only because we have certain molecules and proteins in the body that absorb red light wavelengths, and that those red light wavelengths optimize the function of those proteins. And so the reason for that is because those proteins evolved, they're resonant with light from the sun, and we evolved basically that light from the sun actually drove the existence of those proteins in the body. And so when we add red light therapy back, it's not like we found this new genius thing that enhances life. It's actually this thing that was always there, that always was used by life to power a certain process. And we're just adding it back since we've removed it by our indoor technology-based lifestyle. So someone who spends enough time outside in the sun doesn't need red light therapy. So anyway, that's one example of how red light powers cytochrome C oxidase in the mitochondria, enhancing energy production, as opposed to cyanide, which kills cytochrome C oxidase and kills us immediately. So red light therapy enhances all of the functions of life of the mitochondria, which, great thing for people to remember, a rising tide lifts all ships. So if you have anything that improves mitochondrial function across the board, like red light therapy, improves, or sunbathing, or blocking blue light at night, or even during the day when you're exposed to bad blue light from light sources, that improves mitochondrial function, improves all the systems in general, generally speaking, so since light's powering the body, not only is it important for us so we sleep with the sun. This is the key, getting back to sleep with the sun. So really the issue is, another way of saying sleep with the sun, this step would be saying, don't stay up long when the sun's not present, because you can to a certain extent, but it takes a toll on our body to basically being awake and conscious and not having the sun to power it. You're basically burning the candle at both ends is a good way to put it. That's like a really good analogy, but you can't sustain that. You can't stay up till 4 a.m. on a regular basis and expect to function well. It's not because you're not getting sleep per se, because you could still get sleep, stay up till 4 and sleep 8 hours. It's because you're not getting the power of the sun at the times you're supposed to be getting it. That's why it's a real issue. So that's why it's really good. The best and healthiest people are going to sleep early, waking up super early, even before. It's actually, this is the interesting thing, is it's okay to be up for, like, I have a friend who's a yogi, basically like a yogi master in certain respects. And as far as especially most Westerners are concerned, and he wakes up every day about 2 or 2:30 or 3, and he's awake until the sun comes up, and then he's out and doing stuff, and he goes to bed basically by the time the sun goes down. But because he's dialed in his health, nutrition, and timing and everything, and sleep timing, he actually biologically requires only 4 to 6 hours of sleep a night, if that. And so I guess the point is, on this note, you can be awake when the sun is not out, but it's better to do that on the tail end of sleep when the system is fresh, because sleep, we repair. So you get up, the sun's not out yet, but you're fresh and you're rejuvenated and the cells are nice and healthy. You're awake for a while. Then the sun comes up and you get the sun, you get all the stimuli of the sun and everything. You have the whole day, and then the sun sets, and that's when it's time to go to sleep. So that's really what sleep with the sun means. And then wake with the sun, which is the next one. So sleeping with the sun, I'll just go back to that real quick. That's how we heal ourselves and keep everything going. Wake with the sun. And I'm going to stop here in a second, so you can kind of like help unpack this all.
All good. Yeah.
So waking with the sun is, as we've already discussed, I think pretty thoroughly, actually, as I've discussed, waking with the sun is basically going to power our biology. And like I said in the beginning, I might make minor modifications, and this would be a modification I'll make on this podcast for those listening here. You can wake up well before the sun comes up if you're going to sleep early enough. But the key thing is that time is like, you, based on, again, what I'm learning from this yogi master friend of mine, you can, the best things to do in that kind of time in the morning are meditate. Then maybe, do some like work, like super soulful morning work time. And then you can launch into your day. So effectively, you're sort of really waking is still when the sun and the light comes up. You're not doing a ton of heavy activity before the sun is up per se. It's really like soulful time. And that is sort of like the things we can do. And that is just alone. Those are the 2 steps of the light diet that are like very useful, of the most useful, even, I would say. They're all useful, but those are the most useful because they just allow the whole body to get flowing in sync in this rhythm biologically. And I should add, to sleep to the sun, to not eat late. And that is implied and talked about in the step, but eating late totally throws off the metabolism, because when you eat late, you basically can't, there's no way to process all that fuel that you're taking in the later hours of the day when you don't really have the sun. I mean, the body can still digest, but because the sun, this is fascinating. This is where it gets really interesting. The mitochondria are what process our fuel, right? But the mitochondria, they're the engine, but they are powered by the sun. So this basically, just like a car engine has spark plugs, the ignition system that is basically powering the firing of the pistons on. Like if the ignition system weren't present, you could put in gas, or even if it were faulty, the car wouldn't be able to burn through the gasoline as effectively if the ignition system isn't working, or it might not be able to burn through it at all. So in the same way, you could eat a meal like this could shock people. You could eat, in my opinion, based on what I've been learning, you could eat a not healthy meal or something super high in sugar and carbohydrates, which most people think are horrible for you. If you eat that in the morning when the sun is present, it is completely fine. Like not even like it's suboptimal. It's completely fine because we can utilize it effectively. The real problem everyone has with sugar and carbohydrates is they're eating it at night and in the afternoon too late. That's where we start to have a problem. So basically what I'm getting at is the meal timing is relevant because if it's like, if you're taking in a big heavy dinner, this is one of the many ways that the matrix keeps us trapped, right? For those who think like that, the world is keeping us trapped. We're eating these big, heavy dinners and our body cannot process that food. So it becomes basically, it's turned into toxins and it's disrupting our sleep. And it's just very slowly being digested. And we're waking up heavy, tired, not with a ton of energy because we're not burning super clean. Now, again, someone whose metabolism super freaking active and on fire, they could probably do it and wake up like they're charging and killing it. But anyone who's gone past a certain threshold of like that youthful energy and vigor of like, I can do anything and chew through walls. And I'm like, even me as a young kid, I started facing health issues, which basically means that I came into the world with sort of like suboptimal mitochondria, basically, based on my inherited from my mother, that would be how that happens. If the mother has suboptimal mitochondria and she passes them on to her children. And I was also conceived via in vitro fertilization, which means the natural selection process for healthy eggs was not quite in play. Like my mother couldn't get pregnant. So like I came in at a sort of a biological disadvantage where if we lived in nature, I might have, I wouldn't have been born because my parents had to use an artificial method, in vitro fertilization for that to happen. And that's happening like crazy today. So just to summarize all of this, and especially the meal timing thing, it is so important beyond what everyone could even imagine to eat the majority of our calories in the morning and the middle of the day, and basically past like 1, 2, or 3, basically eat nothing or very little food. Like if you're gonna eat anything after lunch, basically, like, or after 2 or 3, like dinner, it should be like light, like super easy to digest, like not a bunch of like heavy meat, protein, this and that. Like, now there are people who do the carnivore diet and they're only going to eat meat. Then I would just say don't eat anything at that late hour. If you're going to eat meat all the time, eat it only in the morning and the midday, and that's it. Like one meal a day, and that would work better for people doing carnivore. Anyway, that's a ton of stuff. Mic drop. What do we got next?
This is so thorough, and for the listener, definitely this should give you some sense of the type of mind that we're dealing with here. And I would really encourage you to check out this PDF, because obviously I don't think we have the time to go through each of those steps as in depth as we did with these first two. But it just,
I'm so good on time. Just, if you want to go like another however half hour, whatever, I'm free.
Yeah, let's do it. I mean, I think it's really important that you laid it out the way you did and as thorough as you did because of the importance of it. And back to what I mentioned at the very beginning, the last one, cultivate your inner energy, is even more important, right? But for people, I hope they were able to gain a sense of what you were talking about, because the visual that comes to mind when you were explaining the wildfire and things like that is, I used to always be fascinated with those little ice packs that have the metal tab on the inside, and you click that little tab, and that tab would it would like spark the cold pack. Have you ever used one of those? Like,
I think so. I think I've used the hot packs, but yeah,
yeah,
same
it's
idea.
or even the hot pack, right? But the cold pack is cool because it like hardens almost immediately, and it
Mm,
travels from the location of that little metal tab, and it travels out, and you see all these different structures, these crystalline structures, right? Which I know you know about, and you talk about with the structured water and things like that. But all of these processes require energy, and I used to always wonder, like, how the hell does this ice pack work when it can be room temperature, it can be hot on a summer day, and you click it and all of a sudden it becomes cold? Like, how is it that? But it needs that spark, it needs that energy source. And so what you're explaining, basically, to sum it all up, is the sun or light, right? Because we have modern technology to be able to harness various levels of light and wavelengths and frequencies, but sunlight and various frequencies can power our mitochondria. And if our mitochondria are optimized, then chances are we have the best opportunity to have an optimized life. And some of the things I always explain, because I work a lot with PEMF, and I would always say to people that various parts of the body that are dealing with pain or inflammation usually indicate a lower voltage in those cells. And so we can talk about voltage and mitochondria and how all that, compares to or is analogous with energy, right? So if you have a lower voltage, usually that means that this area is diseased, or there's pain, or there's inflammation. And a lot of times we can take this PEMF, or you can ground yourself, and you can usually recharge those cells or the system altogether. So
amen.
it's really cool because you're talking about this from light, and listening to you explain this just helps to remind me just how important light is. And I've also been doing, speaking on your eating carbohydrates or eating food early in the day, I used to be one to not do that. I would always skip breakfast, do the whole bulletproof diet, have coffee, blah, blah, blah. And then I found myself eating dinner late. And then now that I'm here in Budapest and I'm working, I have to admit this, because I'm getting free breakfast at this 5-star hotel, I've been consuming breakfast like crazy. So I've been having a nice big breakfast, getting my sunlight, doing all my things. But towards the end of the day, I'm having smaller and smaller meals. So I'm playing around with that, and I can really understand what you're talking about now, because it really matters how much energy you're giving your body to be able to do the things it needs to do.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Totally.
super cool.
It's really, it makes a big difference for people to be able to do what you're saying, like to get out and start, well, first of all, have some light, but also getting, on that routine of more like, if you're going to eat, whatever food you're going to eat throughout the day, having more of it in the morning and less of it later in the day. And ultimately, again, like we could get into subjects of like fasting, like where people start fasting and they notice that they start to feel really good. Like they start to feel really clear, really clean. And there's something to that. Like that's actually, this is where it gets interesting, is people go from like eating a ton of food to fasting, to eating a ton of food to fasting. Like what I'm again learning as I go deeper into this, if we can just be in a state of like a lighter way of eating, like a light diet, which is ironic because I didn't mean for the
Right.
light diet about light to be about less food and lighter food, but it's starting to go that direction, it seems, based on what I've been learning. And so if we could actually just kind of live more on light and less on food, we could actually be in that sort of greater state of just energy flowing through our cells at more consistently. And maybe another way of putting that is like our body can be connected to the sun, powered by the sun, powered by like sort of cosmic energy, if you will, and solar energy, and just not require the density and heaviness of matter that food naturally comes with. Because ultimately, what are we getting out of food anyway? sunlight, right? When we break, we talked
Yeah.
about it in thorough detail already, but when we break apart the carbohydrate or the carbohydrates in sugar and food, or if we break apart the fat that's from an animal, either way, it's a hydrogen on a carbon backbone. And the hydrogen, the bonds between the hydrogen and the carbon, there's the electrons that are excited in an excited energy state because they've absorbed photons or light energy from the sun. And so when we break that bond and take those electrons and funnel them through the mitochondria, we basically release that sunlight energy. And it's really interesting. Our cells are like an oil refinery. They're taking in crude oil, which is food. We're breaking the food apart, breaking the sugars apart, and we're turning it into NADH, which is like jet fuel. And it's super easy to break apart, like the difference between wood and gasoline. One match can blow up an entire can of gasoline. One match will not light a piece of wood on fire. So we're refining the fuel source in our cells each step of the way till it gets to the mitochondria. And then it's just like jet fuel, like gasoline, super easy and clean to burn. And then we burn through it on our cells. And that's literally what we're doing. Like when you say you burn your food or burn that off, it's literally the same as burning in a fire. It is combustion. It is exactly the same chemical reaction, just more controlled. And so, we do that. We take that sunlight energy and let's see. The electrons flow across the electron transport chain in the mitochondria, and that energy of the electron, the energy exists again in the polarity between the hydrogen and the oxygen that want to react together. It's not polarity so much as it is and polarity could be a term we'll just use for now. There's like an energy difference. It's there's a charge that's present between the two. We'll just say that. And basically they want to come together, but they can't yet. Life's holding them still in suspension. And again, in the case of a fire, hydrogen and oxygen go and there's a lot of energy released. In the case of it's called oxidative phosphorylation in our mitochondria, or that's the fancy term. Cellular respiration is the more general process, but this particular process is actually called oxidative phosphorylation. But anyway, what that means, we're taking that hydrogen and the oxygen the same way a fire does, except really slowly getting as much of the useful energy out of that process as we possibly can, and using what we're doing in the mitochondria, because the mitochondria has an outer membrane and then a folded inner membrane, like I was talking about earlier. And so we're basically using the sunlight energy stored in the hydrogen bonds of the hydrogen and it's specifically in its electrons that's keeping it excited and wanting it to get back, and it wants to get back to that oxygen. We're using that energy and pumping protons, so hydrogen H plus, regular hydrogens, we're pumping them across this membrane into this tight space, the intermembrane space. And there's a ton of these hydrogens here, and they really want to go back down to where they started. There's so many of them. Imagine you pack like 1,000 people in a room that's meant for like 50. Everybody like so tight they want to get out, and so they're trying to go back through. So life is sort of forcing them with energy through a door and getting them all through the door, and then closing the door behind them, and then they have to go through a revolving door to get back in. And then when that revolving door spins, it generates energy. It makes ATP specifically, and so that's called the ATPase in our mitochondria. And so that's sort of like the trick that life has figured out, how to capture this energy. And all life does it with all these different redox couples we were talking about earlier, but we use hydrogen and oxygen. And so as far as this idea of, again, being lighter and on a lighter diet, this is, again, like what I'm referring to as like probably the light diet 2.0 or 3.0. That could be something I talk more about publicly more in the future. This is sort of just like a teaser, but with a lot of detail. But basically, like, we can actually live on less food and lighter food and function still at a really high level. And this is where it starts to get really, really interesting. When food comes, so when we take in food, it is basically, as I was getting at before, it's a way of us getting sunlight, but we have to deal with all the matter of that food. So in other words, if you just get pure sunlight energy, direct sunlight energy, then you don't have to deal with any matter, right? But if you take in food, you have to deal with all of the matter that's present there. And dealing with matter in our mitochondria, in our cellular engines, that creates aging, because generally speaking, because our cells have to process this stuff that's coming in. And in the process of dealing with that stuff, this matter, which is heavy, the system it's just not perfectly efficient. And what's created is this thing called free radicals, or specifically reactive oxygen species. Another term for that would be, in an example, is smoke. Just like some fires, most fires don't burn perfectly clean. There's always a little bit of smoke. Same in our cells. There's always a little bit of smoke in the mitochondria that's produced. And it is just, it is not our friend, basically. And so if we could just live on light, basically, as much as possible, we would reduce our need to utilize energy production from food and produce less reactive oxygen species, less smoke, which is effectively, and simply put, the production of that is what causes mitochondria to age and causes ultimately our cells to age. And that over time is what leads our systems to decline. That is the process of aging. So really, aging in certain respects is just how dependent are we on matter versus how dependent are we on light and energy.
Yeah, it's interesting. I used to say to my clients a lot, when we consume food, and this would also be, I guess, sort of a pitch for fasting or intermittent fasting. When we take in food and drinks and just matter, we're essentially taking in information. And so imagine trying to be as enlightened as possible, or to go into the deepest of meditations. Chances are you're not going to be able to go as deep when you've just eaten, right? And so if you think about that, it's because we're taking in information, we're taking in energy, we're taking in matter that has to be dealt with. And that's why I would definitely start to agree with what you're saying, because the more we can do without this information, the easier it is for us to take care of all the processes that we hadn't had a chance to take care of previously. And I think that's important and really, really cool. But, I think now that we've really exhausted this idea of sun being our energy,
we have,
right?
very, very much so. I don't know how much more it could be exhausted.
Right. Yeah. But it's good, because it's very important. And I mean, we have this glowing star in the universe that is powering all of these things, right? And I think it would make sense. It's pretty easy for people to gather that, the next step 3 would have been live outdoors during the day and sunbathe amply. I think that one just obviously makes sense based on everything you just mentioned.
Yeah.
And I think the point there is just, we've gone so far away from utilizing the sun as our energy source because of modern technology, because of, the fact that we're indoors. We're not grounded nearly as much as we would have been before. Temperature regulation indoors, we're always at like 60 or 70 degrees, no matter what. Right. So there's a lot of things that I think people could read this PDF and gain some more information. But let's go to the water, and then maybe touch a little bit on food, because I know we don't have to dive too deep on the eat seasonal seafood based diet, but I do think it's important that you touch on it, because I thought it was really cool, your perspective on it. But water is a big one. I talk a lot about water, and I know you mentioned in the course about deuterium depleted water, or at least deuterium, but I think where you simplify it well is just drink clean spring water if possible, and then kind of where to go from there. So it's like, if you don't have access to clean spring water, then the next best thing would be this, and then this, and this, and this. But let's talk about that and the importance of that, because I think that's getting a little bit away from the actual sun.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say let's knock through these couple questions and then wrap up from there. I think this is a huge dump, and maybe we do another podcast in
Sure.
several months, and just kind of, I think that'll be really good. So let's see. regarding water, the main thing is just most people are taking in really toxic water, full of like fluoride and chloride from city water. And so it's just not drinking that. So, I'm again constantly learning more and updating my thinking about this. But in general, whether you decide to drink distilled water or you decide to drink spring water, just something that isn't loaded with chloride and fluoride and all these things that they're putting in all the pollutants of modern tap water. But I'd recommend, yeah, the best I can advise as I presently know is a good quality spring water from a good spring source that is, you can order delivery services, you can Google search, and you can even buy it at the grocery store in plastic bins, or bottles, although probably delivery service is better, BPA free plastic bottles if you can find them, so you don't get those toxins. But the cool thing too about the light diet is that as the body is stronger because of living this way, basically the eating less late in the day, eating more, earlier in the day when you're eating, and living basically more on light, in general, we just all the toxins that are in the environment, we can handle a lot better. We can get rid of things the way we're designed. Our immune system can work better. So yeah, so that's basically the gist of the water. It's
And I think maybe you were going to the fact that it's a little bit easier to mitigate thirst, right? Or to understand thirst. I think like once you're fine tuned with having good light, understanding the circadian rhythms, working in within that, uh, bathing in the sun, being outdoors, connecting to the earth, all these things. I think it's a little bit easier to understand when we're actually hungry, and it's easier to understand when we're actually thirsty and when we actually need water. And I feel like that's very important because there's a lot of conversations of you have to drink X amount a day, you have to sleep X
Yeah,
amount a
I
day.
disagree with all of that about water. I think probably like it's really foolish to drink any more than you need at the bare minimum of
Yep.
thirst.
Yep.
I think, and especially from what I'm learning from my Eastern Ayurvedic doctor friend, pounding a ton of water in the evening is also unwise. Another thing that's unwise is having really salty food, because that causes our body to need to drink a lot more water just after eating, which dilutes our stomach acid and makes it so we can't digest our fuel as well. So there's some really interesting nuances that I'm starting to learn about. And again, they'll be part of like the Light Diet 2.0, whether that's 6 months from now, a year from now. But again, people should engage at this level, with a heavy focus on eating less late in the day, and basically, uh, you know, focusing on getting out in natural sunlight in the morning and throughout the day. So
Beautiful,
yeah.
beautifully put. Yeah, so I think we've definitely covered it. There was a couple terms that I thought was really cool. It definitely puts a smile on my face. The Solar Callus. I thought that was a really cool one because that essentially means a tan, and I want to make sure we touch on this just a little bit because there's a lot of people who are genuinely afraid of going out in the sun because of skin cancer. And I just think with all your knowledge and some of the stuff that you've talked about, at least in the course, and some of the other things you've talked about before, I think it would be interesting to hear your perspective on that so people could at least understand why we shouldn't be as afraid if we're doing certain things properly. We shouldn't be as afraid to just go out into the sun and soak it up.
Yeah. So basically, the sun, as we've talked about thoroughly, is sort of the giver of life and the creator of life. And anyone who has become so deluded by modern society, and I don't mean diluted, I mean deluded, like they have gone delusional by the uh, information that modern society puts out. So as to think that the source of all life on Earth could be the primary cause of skin cancer, I probably will not be able to change that person's mind, and it would not be a good use of effective use of energy here. However, for those who are open and willing and interested in learning new things, and interested in living a better life and changing their ways, maybe, um, it's just worth understanding that skin cancer rates have only skyrocketed since we've started to utilize sunscreen, chemical sunscreens, and, eye issues and glaucomas and all these different things they're talking about that the sun could cause in the eyes. Also, cataracts also are skyrocketing more and more as we spend more time indoors and wearing sunglasses and contact lenses and glasses. Eye issues, people needing glasses to see, contact lenses to see, are only skyrocketing since we moved indoors away from the sun. So it's like, for the intelligent life, to the message to intelligent life here is the sun really responsible for these problems? Eyesight damage, skin cancer, or maybe could it be that the complete disconnection from our natural environment, chronic alcoholism that is present in basically everyone today, even the people who are just like, I need 2 glasses of wine to fall asleep. That's like not healthy. That's, in my book, alcoholism, to be honest, not to be brash with people, but truly it's this is the world we live in. These are toxins, and we should look at the things we're doing to our bodies that are toxic before we start blaming the giver of life on earth. So cancer happens when the mitochondria don't work well. The sun makes mitochondria work well. Artificial light makes mitochondria work poorly. Toxins make mitochondria work poorly, less well. That's why they're toxic usually, is they often harm mitochondrial function or they harm other systems in the body. So that's my take on the subject. I wouldn't go out and sunburn. That's not intelligent. Sometimes I myself will overdo it and get a little bit burnt. I'm not worried about it giving me skin cancer, because the two are very separate issues. Like, you don't burn your hand on a pot and say, oh, I'm going to get skin cancer, right? Like,
Facts.
and there's, again, the very elementary theory of sunlight causing skin cancer is that UV light from the sun causes mutations of DNA that lead to failures in replication that ultimately causes skin cancer. Is overly simplistic. Cancer doesn't just happen. Also, this idea is fundamentally wrong based on the research that has shown that cancer is a mitochondrial disease. It's not based on our genetics. No amount of genetic research have they been able to actually show that genes are responsible for cancer. And yet they're still hanging their hat on the idea that sunlight mutates our genes and causes cancer. But cancer isn't caused by our genes. So how does the sun cause skin cancer? It's mitochondrial dysfunction that causes cancer. And the sun has everything to do with mitochondria working well, nothing to do with them working poorly. There's just like, I try not to like get too caught up in it, but there's like this sort of deception or just like perpetuation of falsehoods that people are so, and I myself had been a part of growing up. So it's like, we're all responsible, and like, I'm as responsible as the person down the street for these things continue to happen. I think only when we can each, and maybe we sort of, we can touch on the food thing briefly, but I'd kind of wrap up with this for the most part here, is like, I really have come to believe that anything that we find fault with in the world, there's just a fault within ourselves. Like, for example, people, we have problems with people. Well, then really the fault within ourselves is lack of compassion, lack of patience, lack of understanding. We have problems with, we see there's this problem in the world. I thought about this one. This one's a tough one to reconcile with internal stuff, but at least right now for me, but like, there's people out there starving in the world. Like, okay, well, maybe the problem within ourselves is that we're just, hedonistic and over consuming all the time, and that is the case in all of Western society. So it's like, we can't look at people starving and, if we were living like Gandhi, then we'd say, well, I'm doing the best I can for those people. But we feel bad and we get triggered about it, probably because we know that we're living like, this super hedonistic, over consuming lifestyle. I'm guilty of the same, right? Anyway, at least in respect, like relative to the most of the world. I mean, I'm like transitioning to a yogi lifestyle. I'll sleep on the floor, on a rug, like just with a sheet. I don't use like a bed and a mattress. Like it's because of hard surface means the body can regenerate more effectively versus a soft surface. The body doesn't have as much sort of counter pressure to fully as quickly and effectively regenerate itself, which is another yogic concept that I will leave outside of the scope of this conversation for now. But so it's just, what I'm getting at is like, even with the sunlight skin cancer debate, like, as much as I could find fault with something outside of me with that narrative, like, really probably that whatever fault I would find is just lack of understanding, lack of compassion within myself to just understand like, oh, okay, that's where things are right now. And that's where people are. And it's like, in the more, again, there's this idea like in the, especially in the liberal world of things, which I have no real problems with, but just like, it's just the idea, it is what it is that by like going outside of yourself and the government and things that all these problems can be solved by the government or by, going out and doing a campaign or a rally without ever looking inwards and like solving stuff. And then people are angry and pissed off. And I feel like for me, that's what I've started to learn, even though it's hard and it requires a lot of self-evaluation and observing your faults and owning up to them in many respects. But really saying like, so in the case of sunlight and skin cancer, I believe, like, I think back to Jesus because he's sort of like the perfect example. And people have mixed opinions, of course, about Jesus, but like when you can most fully embody truth yourself, like fully, then somehow that truth actually just starts to manifest in the world. Like one becomes such a great shining light that light spreads beyond them. Whereas like, we're just thinking that we can somehow go and like fix things. And that just really isn't how it works, as I'm coming to learn here.
Our beliefs create our reality, brother. So
Mhm.
yeah, there's a
Totally.
lot within this. I think for the listener, I promise you we're about to wrap up. And and I definitely think we should have you back on whenever you're ready, maybe for this 2.0.
Totally.
There's so much in here. But as I always do when I have a guest on the show, I always
No,
like
I'll
to.
just say before we do the
Yeah,
ending,
yeah,
I'll just
yeah.
say one thing about food actually.
Oh,
And that
please,
would
please.
be, yeah. So, cause I know you want to touch on that. So actually that's one big thing that I want to sort of just make a pointer towards. As based on the available evidence, people eating a seafood based diet, as
Oh, yeah.
I've prescribed, can get a huge benefit from all the DHA and the omega-3s for their nervous system and their brain, et cetera. However, I will just disclaim that I'm currently experimenting, evaluating, and toying with different approaches as well, which could be the part of a future sort of edition of the light diet, let's say, or evolution, I should say. And this is where people can get really, really triggered. So I'm just gonna do my thing here. I don't intentionally want anyone to be upset with these ideas, but what I'll put simply is that a lot of people are getting really interested in the carnivore diet, right? A lot of people really want to do the carnivore diet. And on the surface, it seems like a good idea. And even if you go deeper, it can seem like a good idea because, like we ate meat and meat is not polluted with the pollutants of the ocean. And it's just great source of full spectrum protein. And if we all the organs, we get all the nutrients. Like meat most closely mimics what we are. We're made of meat and the nutrients that animals like us use. So eating that is the most easily and readily available source of those things, which is why the carnivore diet seems like genius. Like on a surface, it's like, that's genius. Get exactly what the body needs by eating animals that are closest possible to us in a respect. And so the interesting thing that I'm dabbling with, and this could make a lot of people not a fan of me, but I'll say it anyway, is that like there is some sort of energetic effect of killing animals and eating their flesh and eating like animals' meats. Like I've eaten a lot of meat for a really long time. And I'm not saying here like I'm a vegetarian, I'm a vegan or something like this, but I'm interested in learning and understanding more about this effect that many people have talked about for a long time, because a lot of the illumined masters of the East have sort of come to this conclusion. And these are people who are like sort of God knowing, we could say, or understanding deeper truths that most of us, our consciousness isn't wide enough to be able to understand. So that's just something I just want to kind of point out. And what I would say specifically from a more scientific perspective here is that the carnivore diet is the easiest fuel for the body to utilize. Now, just because it's the easiest, does that necessarily mean it's the best or the healthiest? I don't know. Maybe. But based on what I'm learning about and talking about here is that we are these beings of light and energy, right? And we utilize light and energy to, that's basically who we are. That's what we are. And so in theory, the healthiest person could either live on no food or very little food, or even suboptimal fuel sources, like what one would consider suboptimal when they're comparing meat versus, let's just say, someone who's living on, I don't know, rice or some other thing like that. And that the healthiest of organisms, the healthiest of beings, would be able to take suboptimal, quote unquote, raw materials and turn them into something very useful, like an alchemist can turn base metals into gold, right? So again, now this isn't a pitch for vegetarianism, veganism, not eating meat, et cetera, et cetera. It's just something that I'm interested in exploring more, because this is sort of the, I'm trying here to bridge the gap between the Western science and a lot of the ancient Eastern wisdom. And that's just one thing where it's like the carnivore diet is a huge obsession in our society today. And I'm like, well, like, how can I understand the seeming imbalance or conflict there? And so that's something I just want to share. With that being said, so anyone who's going to eat seafood and meat, I would just make a very clear point to only eat it in the middle of the day, like between 10:30 a.m. and 1 p.m. or 10 and 1. Like that's the window, because that's when the sun, depending on where you are on Earth, is strong enough to really give the body the power to burn through that dense and heavy food. So that, I mean, of course you could still eat it at 8 p.m. or 9 p.m. if you want, or 7, or whenever people normally eat dinner, but it's not going to be able to be burned through in the case of most people, except the most young, healthy, and vibrant and vital people who are just really charged up on energy, in such a way that they're going to be able to do what I was getting at, which is when I'm learning again from my friends who are yogis, like, and I'm not talking like yogi, like Western who does yoga, like someone who's like basically is like a monk, effectively. We're at our cleanest burning, like maybe not the cleanest, but at some of our best as a human. We can actually like naturally wake up around 2:33, 3:34 at the latest in the morning. Like that is like a natural state that we can live in. And so it's just that our society and the way we're all living, not getting natural light and eating big, heavy meals and living more on food, we've eliminated that. But if you look back, actually, interestingly, at like the greatest thinkers of all time, like Da Vinci and people like this, a lot of them barely slept at all. And they were so aroused energetically by the finer divine energies and the inspiration that they bathed in at all times, that they didn't need as much sleep, and they probably didn't eat nearly as much food at all. It was like an afterthought. Like, I'm so in what I'm doing that food, like whatever, So it's just something worthy of note. That's what I'll just say regarding anyone who wants to get into the light diet course. Definitely go through it. Thank you for your kind praise. There's tons of valuable information. When it comes to the diet, and I did articulate this, it's very important that the last meal be earlier in the day. And even I'll just add that the last meal not be super heavy. So if you're going to have heavy food, protein, this and that, meat, fish, have it at lunch, basically. And that's actually a thing Europeans have done for a long time, is eat their bigger meal at lunch and lighter meal in the evening, which I do think is a really wise thing. Anyway, so that's what I would touch on food. We can touch on all the rest of it, and we can go deeper and go into more we can't really go deeper, but we could get into other facets on another call in the future. So
absolutely.
Yeah, let's wrap it up.
Yeah, let's wrap this up. So, I mean, and thank you for the input there. I think one thing I would just add, I think to piggyback on what you're talking about, is similar to what you mentioned in the course about how different people have different needs for light or different durations of light, is also in line with eating styles, sleeping styles, and everything else, right? So I think what it ultimately comes back to, which is kind of a pitch for my book, is the awareness shift. At what point are you aware enough to know what you truly need, what you truly what your capacities are for energy, for sleep, for optimization, right? So I just think it's worth mentioning on top of all that.
Totally.
But again, thank you for all of the, the vast knowledge that you've shared. And, to go into the two questions I usually ask when I have a guest on the show is, the first one is more of a fun one. And I kind of have a sense where you could have gone with this had you not talked about it a bit. But what would be your top two pet peeves that come to mind right now?
Top two pet peeves. Honestly, like I couldn't give you any. Like I'm trying to create a life where nothing bothers me because I'm either loving, compassionate enough to overcome it. So I wouldn't want to, but by saying I have a pet peeve, it sort of creates a pattern in the field where that thing is a trigger. And so therefore I refuse to create pet peeves for myself by saying them, and just
Good.
say, maybe a better way to phrase it for me would be to say like opportunities for growth, because then it's very different than a pet peeve, because a pet peeve is like a recurring pattern that you're stuck with. I don't like that, and that's the reaction. So for me, opportunity for growth would be two. I could probably give you 1,000, but definitely self-discipline, learning just constantly. I think that's for every man and maybe woman as well, and everything in between. That's a really valuable trait, but especially for the male hormonal system, based on things I've been learning recently. Like this act of like self-discipline is essential. Anyway, interestingly enough, and that's kind of the constant life path of development. And then secondly, I would say just like being willing to like love and surrender more fully, I would say, is for sure, basically overcoming fear, because that's what fear is, just, separation from love, fear of surrender and oneness. And
I like
yeah.
it. Yeah, I'm glad you went down that path, because there was I think so far on all the time that I've had a podcast, there's been one or two other people that have rephrased it in a way that was more about like what they would like to see more of in the world. And I think that's really special. The way you phrase it is, opportunities for growth. Brilliant. I love it. So thanks for that. So the last one, I think this one you'll knock out the park for sure, because I know that you are practicing this. But what would be something that comes to mind that you would be most grateful for?
I would say just like love, like the energy of love is like really a beautiful thing. And it's something that I think is like it's so foreign to so many of us, and maybe not to some, but like I just think we live in a world where people are like, we're taught that like love and just like grace and happiness is something that is just not for us. Like it's for everyone else, or for like people who are in a relationship, or like people who are whatever. But like that love can actually be this like thing of just like boundless beauty that's all around us, and like opportunity, and like whether it's a book to read, or like a person to talk to, or like a meal to have, like that it can just be this expansive thing. And like love is really just based on these theories I've been learning about, like love is just energy. It is the term for the vibratory force that holds all creation together, all of the universe. You know, physicists may or may not have fully isolated what love exactly is, but it's implicit in a lot of the things that are studied in physics. I had a qigong master one time tell me, like, do you know what love is? And I was like, no, I don't really, but I had thought about it for a long time, because like it's a force for sure, that when you have two human beings, it pulls them together. I mean, there's something there. There's people, the materialistic reductionist model of life would have us think that that's just a bunch of chemicals secreted from our brain, blah blah blah, but there's an energy there, based on this more enlightened awareness that we are these energy beings, and we are an energy field, and this matter is just a manifestation of the energy field, like a hologram in this three-dimensional world. And love is actually an energy. And so yeah, I just think that that's something that is really interesting and I want to learn more about. And we can all definitely like surrender more into that, but it's terrifying for most people, including myself. And so I'm grateful for the opportunity to surrender to love more
Beautiful.
and more.
That is beautiful. Well, everyone, we will now wrap this up. This has been it's been fascinating for me, very enlightening, pun intended. And I want to make sure that Matt has an opportunity to explain how you can best learn more about him and what he's doing with Raw Optics. We do have a discount link I'll provide in the show notes, which is www.raw, spelled R-A, optics.com/Joshua J. Holland. And I believe I'll track it down, but I believe the code would be Joshua J. Holland.
Yeah, it is Joshua J. Holland for sure.
Cool. And where can people find out more about you?
So people can go to rawoptics.com to get the glasses, which we didn't talk about probably enough, but they block the light that disrupts all these systems that we did talk about earlier on at night, especially, but even during the day. Screen lenses for daytime, sleep lenses for night. So yeah, rawoptics.com, people can get these. They're a huge life changer, until we've basically changed all the lighting in the world, which we will over time as I continue my work. Yeah. And they look great, by the way. Thank you. And they do look great. That's true too. I appreciate it. The styles are amazing. I have an eye for design and style. I love style stuff. So, and then people can follow me on Instagram on The Light Diet. And I actually have another call I'm going to have to hop on here in a second. So, but this has been amazing. I really, really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you, and let's be in touch on Instagram, like The Light Diet. Yeah, of course, send me a message anytime. Anyone who wants to send me a message on Instagram, I will get back to you at The Light Diet. So yeah. And then Raw Optics, RA_optics is our business Instagram. And you can also message there. I won't get that directly necessarily, but our team will support you for sure with anything you need.
Sounds good. Brother, I appreciate your time and very grateful for all the things that you're doing, and keep spreading light, bro.
Thank you so much. You too.
All right.
All right. Take care, Josh. Great speaking with you. This is awesome.
Yeah,
bye.
Take care.
Walk the talk, talking facts. Move like me, but I move a little fast. Make my move, here to last. Fasten your seatbelts, I'm coming past. Take care of me, longevity. Hack my biology, you better believe. Walking the talk, soul, mind, and body connected. Better go give us a lesson, yeah. Simply walk the talk.